across the street and get it from a network, not understanding that this is a network. And everybody in this room knows which networks I'm talking about and who those people are, but they've dominated those vertical supply chains. So I was over the moon excited about the opportunity to get into an industry, not to own a dispensary, but to control a vertical supply chain and to be known as a people for something that was ours. And they nipped that in the bud from the beginning.
And so Amen Ra, artificial intelligence is like taking the world by storm. And like literally, like I'm an author, I'm a book coach. 2009, I wrote my first book. Took me 8 months to do it. I'm on book number 14. I wrote a book this year. Took me 5 hours, right, to do with artificial intelligence. Then I was introduced to a new AI, Claude 2. So I was ChatGPT all day, right? Then I used Claude 2. It just like changed my whole, like I'm able to upload whole documents and train this AI to do things that would take me literally a year to do. I could do it in a day, in minutes, right? And for me, I feel like AI is the great equalizer. Like we talk about generational wealth all the time, but us as a people, if we jump on and learn about AI, but not only learn, but be a part of the creation of it, we could really close that wealth gap. Can you talk about how urgent and important it is for us to be a part of AI, but then also in what ways do you suggest, as the lead scientist, how do you suggest us as a community embrace artificial intelligence?
Oh, there's a lot there. Let me start by saying thank you for that question. Let me jump in by making an analogy. So AI, a lot of people think about AI as an innovation. AI is about discovery. So what you're starting to see now are companies investing in the ability to discover new pathways for AI. So the analogy I will use is, let's go all the way back to the 1800s and the gold rush. So when you had the gold rush, you had the gold rush broken up into different types of people. So you had the infrastructure people. That were the people who sold the shovels, who sold the pickaxes. Companies like Levi's and Strauss literally came into being because of the gold rush. They sold clothes for the gold rush. Bank, Wells Fargo, two men, last name Wells, last name Fargo, created the bank to support what was happening in the gold rush. The state of California is one of the largest economies in the world because of the gold rush. So infrastructure was important. Then you had people who were actually going into the mines and doing the work to go get the gold. And what would happen? You would get that gold and you bring that back to the town and sell. In that whole pathway, African Americans, we're the ones who are buying the gold and the jewelry at the end. But you have a whole economic system happening of investment and infrastructure and capability before that. We bought the gold and we put the gold on, but there was a whole infrastructure supporting that, and whole economies being made. That is literally what is happening with AI. So you have my old company, NVIDIA, Microsoft, Google, are the infrastructure companies. They're investing billions and billions and billions of dollars into supercompute technology. It's period, point blank. My son can go to college 3, 4, 5 times over with the money I made from equity from NVIDIA's stock in 1 year, doing something that no other technology stock has ever done. They've turned into literally a $1 trillion company overnight, right? But that's because everyone is propping up the infrastructure, and then they're leaving it up to us to be the users of. The challenge for this community, for our community now, is to get in at the front end, the infrastructure and the development end. So you mentioned companies like Anthropic, Inflection AI, OpenAI, all of these companies, they're in the middle. So you've got the big infrastructure companies, then you've got the middle companies. And all they do is create software to then sell to us. So the question is, as a people, where do we want to be? Now, to answer the latter half of that, we need to start imploring our leaders, our community leaders, Congress people, senators, council members, to begin to invest in infrastructure that is for our community. So we talk about reparations. Imagine if at the federal level,
speaking of reparations, I don't want anybody's cars to be towed. There's a Honda HRV, tag LAN9075. Someone's about to get you. There you go, brother, appreciate it. Then there's a Tester, California plate, AXBA, Tester, there you go, appreciate it, thank you.
The federal government invests billions and billions of dollars into supercompute technology. They're at our national labs and they're at universities. Imagine if the flip of a switch they can say any African American in any community now have access to this supercompute technology at no cost. Like, that can be done tomorrow. Any black or brown person from any community in the United States can have access to supercompute power. That's one. Then we have to have the infrastructure. It's supposed to be the HBCUs, but we have to have the infrastructure to train and get our community to the place where they can use this infrastructure. Then that's when the magic happens. That's the innovation. That's the discovery. Because what you're seeing now is companies investing in the infrastructure, and then the discovery is happening, and they're keeping it within themselves. Before I hand it off, one last thing I want to say. If we all agree that AI is the future, and AI will be used to write books, to send emails, to do all sorts of things for us, and we're going to rely on it heavily, why is it that we're so comfortable with people that don't look like us literally creating AI for us to use? We have to jump in.
So I just want to point out that I hope you don't think you're hearing two different conversations, because the infrastructure around AI and around cannabis is the same. The examples that he used the gold rush as the standard that was set for how we got to where we are. I used prohibition, which also was what set up the ability to have now medical and recreational use marijuana. It's actually the same. So I need y'all to have your listening ears not around two different industries, but around one business model that allows us to integrate ourselves into that model. That's the importance of this conversation. So Ash, Syriac, y'all definitely knew what you was doing by putting these two topics on the same stage. And at first, before you started talking and I started talking, I was confused. I was like, I don't know where we're gonna go with this, Brother Mashariki, but it became crystal clear though that these new emerging industries and the opportunity for black folks to get in the beginning still exists.
And so to that point, right, so similarly, I don't want to paint it all rosy, right? Like, people are afraid of AI, right? Because, I'm hearing AI can take over the world and create, worlds outside of the human race and things of that nature. When people think about cannabis, they think about, the reason why legalizing it may be negative, to our society. Can y'all both kind of touch of, are there any potential dangers in cannabis or AI?
So the answer is yes. A book that I came up reading and really enjoyed. I don't know if it was a good book or not, but I enjoyed reading it. It's called To Engineer is Human. It's by Henry Petrosky. The book basically says, it's this book on actual real infrastructure, like roads, bridges, pathways, and so on and so forth. And what the book talks about is the fact that there were so many people who died not only building these marvels, but also so many people died because there were all sorts of structural and challenging and engineering things that we didn't do right. And so bridges would collapse, overpasses would collapse, and people would die. The book basically says, if decades ago, if we paused because we saw all of the problematic things that could possibly happen, if we paused our capability to invest in infrastructure, then we wouldn't be where we are today. So that there were always going to be concerns. There were always going to be things that could negatively impact something. But how do we as a community say, let's still move forward and let's take this on, understanding the challenges that lie before us? To your earlier question. But let me also say this. For everyone to kind of set this, be clear around AI, what people talk about when they talk about these concerns around AI is that some of the best AI models now have the ability to teach itself things. So for instance, if I built an AI model that I use to actually build an architectural blueprint to build a building on its own, use generative AI to build a building on its own, you could actually build a model where the AI teaches itself calculus, differential equations, and any other complex thing that a human would take years to learn. It would teach itself this capability overnight. It's called self-supervised learning. The way you want to think about this is, if you have a 2-year-old in a living room for 5 days out of the week, and every day you come in and you vacuum in front of that 2-year-old, and then on the 6th day, if you bought one of those, remember those Fisher-Price little vacuum things, and you would roll it and the balls would like pop? If you came and brought that and gave that to the 2-year-old, what would they do? That's right, they would grab it, they would stand up, and they would start to push. So there's this, ChatGPT came into prominence because they used for the first time this concept called self-supervised learning, which was, as humans, we learn from observing. Computers never learned from observing. They used to learn from what we would tell them. So for the first time, because you spent hundreds of millions of dollars on supercompute power, you now taught the computer to teach itself. So the fear is, this is the fear is that because you now have the capability for computers to teach itself, when you ask it a question, it can learn how to answer that question correctly. What if you ask it, how do we solve the problem of global warming? And the computer comes to the conclusion its own, well, we've got to get rid of a number of humans on the planet in order to make sure we have a sustainable planet. And then the fear is that these computers are now all connected because of the internet, and then you got Skynet. So we're way off from that. People took this concept of self-supervised learning and then turned it into, Skynet. But we're far from that. But what we have to do, what you'll notice as African Americans, the top AI scientists as African Americans are the ones who are saying we need to be concerned about ethics, we need to be concerned about bias, we need to be concerned about all of these things of AI. That's important, but we also need to have AI scientists who are saying, yes, but let's go, let's move, because the value here is so big, we cannot sit back and let others do this for us.
So the answer obviously is yes. For me, one of my biggest fears and one of the biggest fears of the industry is that government's artificial integration into the product life cycle has never worked. So this is a new emerging industry, and the overreaching and overarching ability for government to shape it is a recipe for disaster, right? So business should be allowed to operate in the market and let the market dictate what happens. We don't have that right now, and for me, that's my biggest fear, is that if it continues in that direction, we'll never get the best out of the industry or the people who are committing themselves to that industry. So for me, government overreach in emerging industry is a recipe for disaster.
And so with the importance of us as a people getting in early, what are the first steps? If someone wants to get into the cannabis business, somebody, they want to get into AI, for the audience, where do they start?
So all of the licenses have now been issued, and we've had injunction over injunction for dispensaries, right? And I've cautioned people. I once was at a Latino Business Association meeting, and all of those Latino businesses wanted dispensaries, and some of them had supermarket spaces. I was like, why would you, with 100,000 square feet of space, want a dispensary and not an indoor grow? Why would you, who is responsible for the trucking industry, in this particular industry, if you wanted to transfer that, you would want a dispensary and not want to translate what you've done in trucking as an ease of entry into the market. So for me, I would say look at all the other opportunities. Don't rush to one opportunity. There's an entire vertical supply chain that we are underrepresented in. But because we've been told the only place we can get in at is in a dispensary, which is a ridiculous proposition, because we all know that within the first 2 or 3 years, businesses, especially retail, fail. So why would we all rush to take our money out of our 401ks and to take out home equity lines of credit and all those kinds of things to get a dispensary, as opposed to looking at what may be best suited for what you've done all your life, or an ease of entry into the market? That's all I would caution people, is not to listen, but to do a little bit of research and find out what other opportunities are available up and down the vertical supply chain.
So, 2 quick things to that question. So, I also did mention that here in Brooklyn on DeKalb Avenue, there used to be an IBM plant on DeKalb Avenue, and my mom was HR at that IBM plant. So when the first set of computers were being built, they were being built right here in Brooklyn. All of you guys know where that Home Depot on DeKalb Avenue, that used to be the IBM. And so my mom knew it was important for me to learn about computers because she saw this revolution coming. So she taught herself how to program so she could teach me how to program in the 4th grade. So and we do that all the time. This new math, for my 11-year-old, I have to teach myself math. Mind you, I have a PhD in computer science. I have to teach myself math just to teach him or help him with his math, right? So we do that all the time as parents. We learn such that we can teach. And that's what we need to do. And so my 11-year-old, he's been learning how to code since, 4 or 5 years old? Because I've been teaching him. So no one here is too old or too out of touch with technology to teach themselves just enough to teach someone else. Period, point blank. My mom was an HR representative at IBM, and she taught herself how to code in BASIC so she could teach me. So we need to be teaching each other. Do not shy away from this idea of learning and teaching. Because through teaching, you mentioned I used to adjunct at NYU, I adjunct at Harvard, I adjunct at a few places, because I've always stayed teaching because it allowed for me to continuously learn. So that's one. Second is, we have to actually, and I'm going to tie it into what Robert Carnegie is talking about in terms of business. So I don't want us to get scared and nervous about AI because we have to learn how to program and we have to learn AI models and deep learning and transformers and all of these things. If you have a business or you are engaged with an organization, AI models are nothing without what? Without data. Without data. Data is the fuel that powers AI. ChatGPT is only ChatGPT because it trained on billions upon billions upon billions of manuscripts and documents. So it's the data. So if you're Robert and you're running a dispensary, there's probably so many things you know about cannabis and surrounding areas and how it's used that you, in the AI world, I'm gonna give you guys a little secret. In the AI world, there's this term called white truffle data. You guys know what white truffles are, right? It's the most expensive stuff that you could put on top of any of your food. It's super expensive. But in the industry, Google, NVIDIA, all of these companies talk about white truffle data. That is data that they don't have access to, but that organizations like yours has access to, and they would pay top dollar for it. So if you have a business or you're a part of an organization that has data that is important, then that's step one in terms of then connecting with other organizations to build models. And then now you're using AI. So don't think about AI as I have to learn how to program first for me to become an AI leader. You just have to be a powerful data player. And then you can jump into the space easily from that point as well.
All right, so as we wrap up, talk to us about the future, right? Take me 10 years from now. What does, in your eyes, what do you want it to look like? What does it look like? What does AI look like? What does the cannabis business look like? And in a perfect world, what does that mean for us as people?
I think AI in the future makes us all smarter and better able to engage at the levels that we would want. And let me give an example. And so Robert Carnegie was a council member when I was working in the mayor's office, and I was running the mayor's office for data and analytics. And I always used to say, I didn't say it out loud when I was going to hearings, but I always used to say, city council, their love language is laws, right? It's like they will throw out a law quicker than you can blink an eye, right? Think about this. Think about ChatGPT. A lot of people think about ChatGPT from the idea that, well, I'll ask it some questions and it'll send me some really cool stuff back, or I'll tell it to write a letter and it'll write a letter and I can copy and paste that and send that. But the power of ChatGPT is processing information and understanding that information and then making it available. So think about processing information. Imagine if you had an AI model that went through every single local law that has ever been written over time and processes that and then gives that to you as a business owner or as an individual, and now allows you to navigate your community in almost as if you are the most expert urban planner on the planet. You know more and everything about your community now because you've processed that information in a way that is usable. Think about processing. How many of you, probably most of you today, have already downloaded an app, and when they give you that like privacy and make you sign off and say accept before you can use the app? Imagine ChatGPT processing that information for you. Or I just bought a car a little while ago, and I had to sign so many documents. I didn't read any of those documents I put my signature on. Imagine your ChatGPT, your large language model, if you will, processing that information for you, and then popping up and telling the dealer, no. We don't want to sign because of this, and this, right? That is the future of technologies, that we will be more empowered and more thoughtful and smarter about our ecosystem than ever before. I think that's the good side.
So for me, as it relates to cannabis, a lot of people don't realize that there is a tremendous amount of science between the growth and cultivation of the plant, right? And so there are many people who are actually scientists who are hired in order to produce the most potent or the longest lasting or those. So I think that myself and Brother Mashariki 10 years from now will have created between AI and cannabis things that are that deal directly from a medicinal standpoint to what ails our community, right? So in my store, right, shameless plug, we have 300 products. Some of everything from tinctures to salves, right? I used on this bad left knee from St. John's, I used some creams last night that were CBD and THC based. So really, science is going to move to the place that whether it's diabetes in our community, whether it's asthma, there will be a marriage between technology and the plant, which comes from the earth, that will have its healing properties. That's my vision, and that's my dream, is that for those of you who are old like me, who are still calling it reefer or weed, that cannabis will actually be used more for its healing properties, which exist with or without technology or my dispensary, and were used by Native Americans for healing purposes. We'll go back to that, but enhance it by using technology and AI to get the greatest properties out for diseases and ailments that are directly negatively impacting our community. For me, that would be success.
All right, so any last words for our audience, and then also where can people connect with you and find out more information from you?
I think the thing that keeps me up at night is that opportunities like this are absolutely amazing, and I want to thank Syriac and his team for inviting me to be a part of this. The thing that keeps me up at night is that my day-to-day work pulls me away from people like this. But that's because when I got into the computer science space, it was the early 80s, and that was the name of the game. You had to work around a certain type of folks, and I just would implore everyone out here to start embracing these technologies and saying, we should be, so that the next generation, my son, and folks in my, and where's my nephew, Cat, somewhere around here, also 11, 12, that they don't feel like they have to be separated from their community in order to hit their dreams the way that they want in computer science or AI or math. And I think this is the generation that's gonna pull all of that together. LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn, ping me, but yeah, I think that's Instagram. Those are the best ways to keep in touch. But please, if there's anyone that wants to reach out and engage, I'll be more than happy to and excited to engage in any way, shape, or form.
So I'm excited about this environment because it allows us to be unencumbered by social norms, and we can in here go up to each other and go, hey brother, what you do? And then begin to have a conversation about what you do and what you do and how that impacts me and whatever. I would like that to be outside of these walls. So for your son and for my sons and daughters to be able to think that it's socially normal to go to somebody and ask, hey, what is it that you do? On the street, on the bus, on the train, because we're so inhibited by being in our own bubbles that this is a safe space that teaches us we can go and talk to folks and find out what they do. So if we could take that outside of here, and if nowhere else, at least in our community, and make it a norm to be able to ask somebody what they do and what it took for them to get that. Whether it's the restaurant owner that you're buying dinner at his restaurant in our neighborhood, or whether it's the bus driver, or whether it's somebody who has a look that you like, break down the barriers to be able to go and talk to them and ask them what they do. Because it's so comfortable in here to do that, I can't imagine what it would do for our community. I can't spread it to the whole world, but we can do it in our community immediately tomorrow, begin the process of asking people and making it socially acceptable and the norm to ask somebody, no matter how they look, no matter what they're doing, what it is they do, and how you can be connected to what they do.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.